Good morning, salam, everybody. You take care. It's nice to be here once again. Um, we did the last article, which is sorry, the end of the world at work, and and then yesterday Davos happened, and I don't know if people have been following, but I'm waiting for been following. But that is most interesting. There's some highlights. We're going to combine that with our history of the First World War and the what we explored in the article, which is the transfer of the global the global financial center or the international financial center um, of the pre First World War to the United States by the act of the First World War, and how it created the kinds of instabilities that inevitably led to the second, and then which gave us first the Bretton Woods Order and then the post Bretton Woods Order, which we just witnessed the final breakup of. That's finished. But it was really interesting as that was going on. We can see that, as we've been saying on Dystopia Unmasked all along, that the Chinese want the rules-based order to continue, right? Yeah. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. I've been having some trouble logging in. I'm glad it's worked out.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just giving a rundown on the articles and some perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Yeah. So I was just saying that the Chinese don't want, as we said, about almost 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that the Chinese want to perform a very limited castration of the United States. They just want to remove one testicle, you know. um, but the system for them it is working, and so what we've seen is the Europeans coming out, the Canadians coming out and declaring themselves middle powers. And they include Australia in that. I just wonder what's common about all of them. But yeah, then and I suppose that they will also include New Zealand. So what we're seeing this emergence of what is now being called the middle powers. Okay, and they include the UK. Um, and then von der Leyen was really talking about the fact that they just, after 20 something years, have secured the Mercosur deal. And I was
Yes.
laughing because when part of the strategy of the United States was with the imposition of Ukraine and the destroyal of their capacity to expand gas imports from Russia, we are still importing gas from Russia. It never stopped.
Yes.
Okay. Despite what's going on. And what the United States knew was that Europe was going to have to move their industries to Latin America.
Yes.
That's part of this. That's part of the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And the two options are Brazil and Mexico. Why? Because they have steel and electricity. Okay, and the
Mm-hmm.
kinds of interlocking industrial ecosystems that allow them to do anywhere else you've got to build. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, and um, and the Americans have already made sure that that's on lockdown. So
Yes.
right, they
Mm-hmm.
and so they're now redesigning the system. So now we've got the middle powers. Um, Acting by the constraints that are already there. But let me step back and hand over to you because we have an article and we have a thing, and I was just introducing.
No, this is really good. These days I've been a little bit frustrated with the way uh, the state of the world is being reported on, and I'm personally dealing a little bit with. I don't know if it's my ego or what it is, but it sort of upsets me that suddenly, number one, everybody has always been against imperialism. And, we're in 2026, and I remember very well in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Mhm,
when we were trying to articulate to liberal standard uh, mainstream
mhm, mhm,
that what was going on in the world was imperialism. What was going on was brutalism, was weaponization of human rights for spurious purposes. Um, we were treated so badly when we were pointing out that all of this
mhm,
has been described, among other people,
mhm,
chiefly by leftist Rosa Luxemburg, Lenin, people in that line of thinking, Hart and Negri, people in that line of thinking had extensively pointed to the nature of the pattern of exploitation and pattern of interaction at the core of the rules-based world order. And then you had people like Eikenberry, who was really just regurgitating the standard narrative. And I have a collection of articles responding and reacting to lectures that we
mhm.
gave and to public lectures or to interviews that we gave. And there's some very famous names among the people who reacted and with dismissal. Um, what's the name of the Munich conference, the Munich Security Conference guy, Ischinger,
Mhm, mhm,
uh, and Sloterdijk, an Austrian uh,
mhm.
f- artist philosopher with his mouth in every soup, um, talking about everything under God's sun, uh, dismissing our presentations of the world as it has now been described by this Canadian guy
By
to
Carney.
the yes, to the
Yeah.
pardon me,
By no, by Carney.
Carney, to the
Mhm.
appraisal of everyone. Oh yes, yes, but how accurate? Oh how you know, and I'm I'm finding myself in a strange place where I don't know how to deal with this. Oh, so now suddenly all of you agree. Where have you been? It's been 20 years.
Carney said that basically they knew it was going on, but they would look the other way. That's what he said.
I mean, it's very frustrating for me because the
Oh,
whole way
no, no, don't. I wouldn't be frustrated. I
that's my
look at
first
this and
question
go,
to you.
yeah.
How do and I know that I'm certainly not the only one. I'm not a card carrying Marxist by any stretch of that concept, and I know that the card carrying Marxists, I know that they have been saying this since before I even understood the concepts they use to get to this conclusion. And I can only imagine what these people are feeling this moment at this very moment.
Okay.
So
Well,
my question
mhm,
to
go
you
ahead.
is how do you deal with that? How do you deal with 20 years of derision, of belittling, of deplatforming, of defamation when suddenly some official comes and speaks it into the World Economic Forum, and then the whole world is like, oh, but we kind of always knew. How do we deal with this? Because this is real.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing about okay, the two things about um, dystopian mass that I would like to highlight.
Hmm.
The first one is that this is attempts to be an a ideological platform. So our readings are not a structural and strive to be outside of ideological capture. Okay. Now, being outside of ideological capture does not mean that we refuse to um,
Engage with.
engage with ideologies where we see something which is beneficial.
Hmm.
Okay, but the performance of an ideology as a
Cult.
field of 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 deliverance
Hmm.
and redemption, right? In the theological sense, we reject that as being irrational. It does not make any sense. Why we will not do that, right? Not it's not possible that any idea, the whole performance of a new gospel, right?
Hmm.
Whether it be Marxism or liberalism or whatever, we refuse all of that,
Yes.
right? The next thing is that,
Oh,
um,
there are people logging off already. I'm joking. I'm
yeah,
joking.
yeah. So you notice that I'll engage Marx, I engage Adam Smith, I will engage, right?
Hmm.
And
In the
and often
history
I
of
do,
ideas, in the history of ideas.
yeah, and often what you see is that what dominantly claims its descent from these thinkers often differs substantially, right? The thinker themselves would not recognize the movement
Mm,
that claims them, right? Um,
yes.
and so that's one thing, and the next thing is that, in a sense, we are we strive to be more realist than the realist. You know, the,
That's if
the
we
re-
accept that the realists gave themselves the correct name in terms of, you know, in terms of a description of what they actually do, which is not realist, but it is vested interest. Uh, uh, it's zero sum vested interest pursuit analysis.
yes, and so what's real about our way of examining these things is we attempt to look at the interests, the affective connections, how do people structure meaning, etc., in a way that allows us to know, to be able to understand the kinds of constraints that an actor is faced with,
Yes, exactly.
right? And to not have to perform, and not to have to do that with a theological performance, right? So at the
Okay.
end, to make sure that we make it very clear that China is bad and Europe is good, or Russia is this and that, or you are a Putin supporter, or you are that. We stay out of that, right? That is not a space of analysis. That is a space of theological performance.
If I may, for our audience, I'd like to read from the article, The End of the World That Worked, the note
Mhm,
on method, just to have it available and at the
mhm,
back of our minds. So you wrote a note on method. These articles, published weekly, are working notes, not conclusions. They represent an attempt to think through structural patterns as they reveal themselves rather than to react to events as they arrive. That's an important distinction. The method is deliberately iterative. Patterns are sketched boldly by Alex, boldly enough for us to be able to test them.
mhm,
Interpretations are pushed until they either illuminate something or these interpretations may break against evidence. But that requires courage to pursue paths knowing full well that this path might lead into a cul-de-sac. And one has to have that energy to walk to that cul-de-sac and say, this is a cul-de-sac, let's return and find another path.
mhm,
Claims that may appear definitive are provisional. Overstatement is used as a tool for clarity, not as tools for certainty. The aim is to render patterns legible so that they can be examined, refined, or discarded. And you just say it so simply, but this is exactly where, in my mind, and I understand as this is your method and yours as well, this is where I make a sharp distinction between high quality academics and intellectuals and foot soldiers. It's a luxury that an intellectual or thinker or philosopher can
Mhm.
allow themselves to say, I have worked on this line of thought for weeks, for months,
Mhm.
2 years, and have come to the conclusion that its overall utility can be disregarded or discarded. It's a
Mhm.
luxury that academics in employment very often cannot afford to have. But it is also
Mhm.
the mark of high level freedom of inquiry, freedom of research.
Mhm.
And again, I will repeat the word courage. It requires a lot of courage to turn around to the crowd and say, look, you've seen me toil away at this subject for such a long time, and I have a conclusion to
Mhm.
give you.
Mhm.
Everything I've discovered does not satisfy the thesis and the research thesis that I am embarked with.
Mhm.
This is something that they don't really teach at university. I understand that this most exalted of all freedoms of research is not taught, to not be ashamed of not finding what you supposed and surmised.
But then and then it tells you it, because that tells you what the method is for.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If
mm-hmm.
if
It
it,
continues. The
yeah.
approach at use at Dystopia Unmasked requires working in the open. Finished analysis often arrives too late to be useful for navigation. By the time a theory is complete, the moment it was meant to clarify may have already passed. I, therefore, Alex writes, share these notes as they develop, accepting the risks of incompleteness and error in exchange for the possibility of thinking alongside others, those of you in the chat right now, alongside others in real time. That is the value, that is the methodological approach
Mhm.
that Dystopia Unmasked is unfolding here. And I really, I'm very grateful that I can be a part of this, thinking in public. Some observation will prove generative, others will require revision. Some may collapse entirely. That is the nature of this kind of work. If you find these notes useful, engage with them as you would any provisional thinking, critically, generously, and with your own questions in hand. Push back where patterns seem forced. Offer alternative readings. Offer alternative readings. And this is where some of the most sharp critics then have only silence to offer. It's very easy to criticize edifices, and it's very difficult to suggest repairs, to suggest stabilization, to suggest
Yeah.
constructive
Yeah.
propositions.
Yeah.
And
Or to be able to say, you're wrong because of so, and then live with my reply, as I must live with your critique, right?
exactly,
And
exactly.
but I think there's one very important thing. Sorry to disturb you. There's one very important thing, and that is that as a researcher and thinker,
Hmm.
you must you must get yourself to the point where you actually derive a pleasure from being wrong, from being proven wrong, right? Because the self required wants to be right, right, and that you
Mm,
acquire that as a child, right?
mm.
And so to be as a researcher and a thinker, you have to you actively have to cultivate a an enjoyment in being proven wrong, okay? Because that is the only way you will be able to um to
Pursue.
truly protect your integrity. Okay, that
Mm.
you enjoy people taking your thought to its limits, revealing it so that you can think it. Because if they do that, they perform the service for you.
It's the difference between hubris and heuristic. It just came to me because I'm thinking, if you are so certain of your findings that you do not accept questioning, you do not accept criticism, you do things in secrecy, you sort of hide to fix things, or you deny having seen it wrong, or you start now,
Hmm.
flipping and switching your own interpretation of what you said to make it fit new findings. That is the mark of hubris. Someone who
Hmm.
refuses to accept that they're fallible in their thought and in their approaches. And sometimes, if you work for certain institutions, you see yourself in positions forced to to avoid admitting
Hmm.
having made a mistake or having been wrong.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna, while you're talking, I'm listening. I'm gonna go get a book. Right.
oh, all right, all right. So that is something that I have hands-on experience with, watching some senior researchers uh, do all types of dances and bending over backwards to not simply say we were wrong. And that is the mark of hubris, is what I would say. And what I've just read to you from Alex's pen, making the methodology of dystopia unmasked explicit, and the explicitness of this is what is valuable to me. I find uh, carries the mark of what is heuristic. And if you look
Okay.
for the definition of heuristic, very often you will find a shorthand that says a heuristic approach is an approach that pursues knowledge,
Hmm.
including um, that pursues knowledge and 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 is often mistaken.
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
not the technical that's not the technical use of heuristic, in my view.
Yes.
A heuristic is exactly what I've read to you now, is to
Yeah.
say, in the pursuit of accuracy, I may have to MacGyver the mechanisms of identifying the accuracy of that which is under my scrutiny. And as I do so, my tools may be limited, my findings may be tainted. As I do so, my findings may be incomplete. There may be limits of validity to my statements. The limits of validity are as important as the validity I. Yes, please.
I would replace it, not might, will.
W- That's
Will.
it. That's
Right.
it. That's it.
Because of the nature of thought and the nature of logical assertions, which is that it is, in as much as it is right, it can be wrong, and
And
that
oh,
there
that's
there is
beautiful.
so
You,
so
you
it's important to understand the contingency
mm.
of human thought, right?
Wow, that's it. That's it. And there are two things that just went through my mind. One is from my rapper's brain, is that
Mhm.
perhaps it should be not hubris and heuristic, but hubris and humility mediated by heuristics.
Yeah.
Sort of. So that's one thing. And the other thing is what you've just said reminds me of another thing which I feel very much at the heart of how you do research. And it's a lesson that I've taken with great pleasure and great insight. It is not to confuse our thoughts about reality with reality.
Yes.
And you've been doing this very, very uh, um, explicitly. All right, let me stop there and finish the last paragraph here. So you've said, if you find our notes useful, engage with them as you would any provisional thinking, critically, generously, with your own questions in hand. Push back where patterns seem forced, offer alternative readings. Please do. Add evidence where they are missing. And that is how structural insights become robust enough to bear weight. This is a process of collective sense making, not solitary pronouncements. However, however, the pronouncements, the research, the passion to do so is very, I don't want to say singularly representative of your creativity and your intellectual style. But we can see in all the articles that there is an intellectual style specific to um, Dystopia Unmasked, specific to your breadth and what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a specific word here, and that is heterodoxy. There is a
Mhm.
heterodoxy at work here.
Mm,
Um, and I think it enriches everyone who has the patience to sit and take in the approaches that you test in trying to make sense of reality for everybody. And I think the value of these heterodox approaches is, as the eating is in the pudding, the value is in the accuracy of the predictions you've made over the past 2 years.
mm.
That's just my opinion. That's just me.
Okay.
This is how I measure the value of someone who pronounces themselves as frequently and as deeply as
Mm.
you do about the way geopolitics are shifting. You can simply go back, listen to what he said, read what he said, and look at what is happening. And if it's congruent with reality, I think that's a good, uh,
Exactly. Exactly.
right place to invest one's intellectual time.
I mean, one. Okay. The one thing that I would like to kind of put in here is that there are people that we will learn from and that we base our often base our methods upon. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I am very Foucauldian in my approach. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Jacques Foucault, I utilize a lot. Okay. Um. Um. Akili Mbembe is a student of Foucault who both agrees and fundamentally disagrees with Foucault. Okay. I named that a good student. Okay. And so he came up with, so Foucault found the concept of biopolitics, and Akili Mbembe came up with necropolitics. And he said that actually Foucault's biopolitics is based upon a necropolitical reality, or which precedes it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, um, so that for me, that's a good student. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then Baudrillard, he wrote a book called Forget Foucault. People thought he was against Foucault, but the book is fundamentally Foucauldian in method. It extends Foucault, right? But it disagrees with him. That's the nature of thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you see people taking a thinker
Yes.
and and reducing them, or not reducing them, but casting them as a prophet, as some kind of prophet, right? Who absolutely has the reality, and and you quote him as the final arbiter on every argument.
Mm-hmm.
This 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 is not thinking, right? This itself is not thinking, okay? Because thinking must be able to re-examine the premises of its thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and there are different points at which, because when somebody comes to you and they need a solution to something, that's not the point to be re-examining the premises of your thinking. You have to come to a solution for them.
Yes.
Okay. But in the times that you are thinking about thinking, that's the time that you must um, re-examine the foundations of your thinking. And but sorry, I wanted to move on because
I have it
we
in front of me, and that is
yeah
Fractured
because
Sovereignty,
hmm
the 2026 World Economic Forum Perspectives. Fractured Sovereignty is what is in front of me. And in here, you highlight a couple of essential points. And you talk about the future of globalization, because I think this is one thing is the past and the lies that Carney acknowledges. The
hmm
other thing is his silence. Well, not silence, but his his surface level sort of general sketching how they're going to be moving. You get into the future of globalization. You want us to discuss that a little bit, perhaps? You touch on geopolitical security and Russian assets, and you touch on relations with the United States in general. So, the future of globalization, geopolitical security and Russian assets, and the relations with the United States as three dimensions that you touch on in your exploration of fractured sovereignty.
and of course and of course every one of them highlighted the genocide in Palestine.
Mm. Yes.
I mean,
So
none of them did.
come again, please.
None of them did.
And this is where the whole thing, this is why I can't tolerate the satisfaction that I've picked up in the social media. I've
Mhm,
picked it up a little bit with what Carney said. Said, but
mhm,
but we've known this. If
mhm,
if you hadn't been paying attention at all to
mhm.
anything since 9/11, if you hadn't been paying attention at all, at the very least, at the very least, when after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, 12 months, 20 months, not a single word was said about responsibility to protect, about R2P and all these human rights and rule of law and international law and th- wh- uh, when nothing was said, that was the moment I was expecting the entire world of thinkers to say, and politicians and decision makers to say, ladies and gentlemen, we are in uncharted lands. There's a rupture of the global order. Not a single word of that nature was uttered by the very people who are now in front of the World Economic Forum speaking as if they had always known. Liars, 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 all of
Well,
them.
that's that. But yeah, but I mean, if you still expect honesty from politicians, then you know, get a get a year's get a year's supply of laxatives.
Hold on. So, what I have here in front of me are notes that you shared with me in which
Mhm.
you're saying there is a rupture of the global order. And you do that, you speak on that in three dimensions. You say there's a permanent shift, there's a return of power politics, and there is something to be said about domestic resilience. What is the permanent shift you speak of?
Okay, so we're looking at okay, so you're referring to the notes that we produced
Mm-hmm.
on what happened in Davos yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, or what has happened in Davos. Yeah. Yeah. So the themes that we're seeing is that one is that the we saw the emergence of what the Canadians are called middle powers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're identifying themselves as middle powers, and those middle powers are Europe and former um, majority white um, European colonies. Okay, those are what constituted mainly. And then it talks about the great powers and it identifies India as a rising great power. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
this was this is now the re-emergence of a kind of Europe that has been absent since the Second World War. Okay, and yeah, and this so they rightly identify that as a rupture
Mm-hmm.
in the American hegemonic order, in which they stood under NATO and they stood under the rules-based order. And he's admitted that they knew that the rules-based order was fundamentally flawed and reflected the interests of the powerful, and that they, as smaller powers, would just look the other way.
Mm-hmm.
He said it. Okay,
Yes.
so that means that, and that's good because I've been saying that for the last 30 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see it acknowledged, but I didn't need him to acknowledge it to know that it was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that what we're seeing now is that then we saw Ursula von der Leyen make her own statements. One of and some very interesting, very important things that Europe is focusing upon its own security architecture. So, in other words, its own armies and its own weapons industry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, its own
Mm-hmm.
AI and its own industries. Um, and that Europe is seizing Russian assets and will fund and funding Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question is, are they going to be funding Ukraine from the seized Russian assets or from monies that Europe raise, right? Well, they wouldn't need to seize Russian assets unless they were going to use that to fund the Ukrainians. And that, yeah, and that in itself is going to worsen the crisis, right? Yeah. Mhm.
Can we zoom in just briefly before we continue on this particular and specific fault line that is Ukraine, this borderland bridging Russia and the European Union economically, militarily, geographically? Can we say a few things about that? I could start by throwing in one point, not to dwell on it because we have a lot to talk about, but just for our audience, um, for those of you who aren't permanently thinking about Ukraine, perhaps some points to assist you in developing a perspective on the matter. And here's at least one thing that I think should weigh heavy in how one looks at Ukraine, and that is that Ukraine has to survive its positionality. Ukrainians have to survive their positionality. They've built their nation on top of an unstable macro political fault line. The nation, these human beings live on a fracture that is permanently in motion. And by that, I really mean, as the name Ukraine itself expresses, it is a borderland, and that borderland is the locus of encounter of economic interests that have been pushed asunder by the United States. Uh, the past 30 years, let's say 24 maybe, because of the speech Putin gave to the German Bundestag, I believe it was a few days after 9/11. He suggested and offered, in other words, but he suggested and offered to the European Union to merge with Russia into what a predecessor of Putin had called the European House. Gorbachev in the 80s had offered a proposition where he suggested some kind of larger economic cooperation between Russia and the European Union, merging that landmass and everything in between. Please, just 2 seconds. I'll
Yeah.
give it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
Euro-European.
just wanted people to know that at that point, American geostrategists were running into the corner and peeing themselves, right?
Mm,
And as that kind of conversation continued, they would have to reach for the nappies because that is the most terrifying thought for them.
right, and I remember that the idea was shorthanded as from Vladivostok to Porto. Integrate the market from Porto to Vladivostok. And that was, as you say, highly problematic for the United States.
Yeah.
So the European House is a concept that really exists, and it was presented by none other than the man who has been credited for bringing down the Soviet Union without using the nukes. Mikhail Gorbachev, who passed away a few years ago. So the European House is an idea that exists and that has been torpedoed by the United States of America
It's,
for as long as it's been out there.
and you know that my position is that the United States used Ukraine and and duped the Europeans into committing to that. And
Let's
and
talk about that.
my my conclusion about that was that in the belief that they had to depend upon American protection, they refused to disagree, and they've led themselves into a situation which is utterly against their interests.
And this is where I have some questions to ask you. Again, not to waste time on this, but in this moment, this day, today, 21st of January 2026, Europe is in a mess. Because just a few weeks ago, Europe, the EU, led by Germany and France, and by von der Leyen, the head of the Commission, and the head of the EU, well, we know that the Spanish Minister of Foreign Affairs, the name escapes me right now, but he was a bit less gung ho than von der Leyen, the Spanish man. It'll come to me in a second. But the point I'm trying to make is this: just a few weeks ago, I can count them on one hand. You were running around telling us Russia is bad because it's an autocrat led country, and it's bad because it invades other territories. And then we had the pleasure of witnessing the Venezuela activities by the man, no, by the figurehead at the top of that political entity that the EU has thrown its entire weight behind. And the absurdity of this becomes even more clear when you realize that the F-35s that the Europeans have bought indeed cannot be utilized by the Europeans themselves to defend themselves in case the United States and America decide for whatever reason that it is time to activate the military bases they have in Kosovo, in Italy, and Germany, and I don't know where else. So you can't even use the equipment you've bought. You can't use it because you bought it from the hegemon who has a kill switch on it. You want to defend yourself, you get into the planes, and sorry, I'm being a bit
No,
skeptic.
I'm saying, you're there, you're pressing the button to shoot, and they turn it off.
I mean, it's a what is this? What is this slapstick? Geopolitical slapstick.
No, but this is the nature of the order, okay? And the nature of the order has always been carceral. The United States cannot help itself. That's why it has the largest prison population in the world,
Mm.
right? And so, um, and so, if you want to, if you, basically, when you buy that equipment,
Mm-hmm.
you also buy the equipment knowing that the United States will not permit its use for things that go against its policies, right? And because you bought a platform, they reserve access and they can turn off your capacity to use certain types of some of the facilities.
If we add to this, I think there's about 40,000 US troops inside the country of Germany.
Mhm.
Normally, when you have a dispute, the type that von der Leyen and Macron and Carney are calling a rupture, if
Mhm.
you have a rupture with somebody, in conflict resolution and conflict transformation speak, you have to dissociate, disaggregate, you have to disconnect. And
Okay.
when you have that, but in order to have your peace, in order to have your autonomy, and when you have 40,000 of those troops inside of you,
Okay.
you're in
So,
trouble.
so I want to be very clear.
What type of rupture is that?
Exactly, very clear. This this is a realignment.
A
Europe
realignment.
cannot have a decisive rupture with the United States.
So it's impossible.
It cannot, right? In the same way that it cannot have a decisive rupture from Russia. So they are seizing Russian assets, knowing that the Russians are going to continue supplying them with gas. Hear that? That 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 is that for me is the signal that makes me ask the most questions. Because
Mm,
throughout this, the Russians have supplied them with gas. They have not
yes.
reneged on their contracts. And as far as the Russians are concerned, they have reneged on theirs,
Yes.
right? And that for me is problematic. Okay. And you know that I read that power is power. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is that there are just these rising contradictions in the European position, which um, I know a policy, somebody's strategy sitting down has to think about them, but they're never in the public signaling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that tells you one about their desire and two about the kinds of anxieties that they have.
Yes.
So how do they perceive power? Okay. And one of their the what is very clear is one of the main means of controlling of projecting and controlling power is to control the narrative that is called propaganda.
Absolutely. And I have the numbers. I have the numbers because this is,
Hmm.
I'm so grateful you point this out. The absurd nature of this kabuki that we're being treated to
Hmm.
with a nuclear war backdrop is
Hmm.
absolute kabuki and it's suicidal. I think in 2020, the Russian gas imports to the European Union was between 40 and 45% just 5 years ago. Um, Today, we're not at zero. We're somewhere between 12 and 20%. So it's not a zero thing. You're still receiving oil from the enemy that you declared worthy of
Yes.
sanctioning.
Yes. And if the Russians wanted to, they could have just shut that off,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They could have shut it off and just caused a shock, and they have not.
So this is something that I have always found very kabuki-esque, is that I've gone from 45% reliance on your gas to somewhere just half of it.
Yeah.
It's not 5%, it's not 2%, and I'm running my mouth consistently about how bad your governance system is, but the fact is you keep supplying me because otherwise I'd have civil wars going on and people freezing to death and so on and so forth. And
Hmm.
the gas I'm buying outside, I haven't checked those numbers in a minute, but the gas I'm buying outside, among other people from India, is gas that India is buying from you to sell back to me.
Exactly.
It's kabuki at all the way down.
Exactly. And this is why I say that the Americans maneuvered the Europeans into a position that is against their interest in the American protection of American strategic interest, in that they do not want a Eurasian system to exist without having to go through itself.
And here's the
Right?
question I have for you.
Mhm.
How viable is that US strategic position?
Um, as long as they have held Ukraine, I mean, you see it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's done,
Let
right?
me ask again the
The
other
the
way.
the next problem. Okay, the problem you have is what they have destroyed is an existential base for trust between Russia and the Europeans, and will not that that will not recover except if there is another threat which is great enough to force it. But then it means it didn't resolve the anxiety, right? That anxiety has been replaced by one which is larger, right? And that is the only case that you're going to find any kind of serious alliance cooperation between the two. The
Mm.
Americans have the Americans have very successfully driven that wedge in, and then got the Europeans to drive the wedge in even further. And at the very beginning, the Russians um, were they attempted to resolve it. Okay, and there's a and I keep saying I have expected Ukraine since about 20 2010,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I and I I was talking about it then. I mean,
Mm.
I had kind of stepped back from some of geopolitics at that point,
Mm.
but with the people who knew me, I was talking about it then,
Mhm.
and um, and what has emerged has. it hasn't surprised me at all.
Yeah.
It's almost followed the script, and I don't know how I got it so damn right. I mean, the one thing that has always worried me is that at the point that the Europeans put boots on the ground, all hell breaks loose. Right? That's almost like that's crossing a Russian red line that it has not only existed. This is not about Putin. This is about Russia. Okay, we see this. We see this going all the way back to Alexander Nevsky. Okay,
Yes.
so go look up Alexander Nevsky. When you look up Alexander Nevsky, and he's fighting the Teutonic Knights who were coming out of Königsberg, which is now Kaliningrad, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is where the Russians have their port, their only northern deep water port out of which does not freeze over in the winter,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to get out from there, they have to pass through the Danish Straits, right? So you're in the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is not very deep; it's about 55 meters, so it limits the kind of craft that they can have, and 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 then to come out, you have to pass through Denmark, right? Because the Danish Straits, the Denmark is on both sides of the strait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, above above this above so the Baltic Sea is where the Nord Stream 2 was. Okay, but if you look at the way that the Baltic Sea is, there you have Kaliningrad, you have these smaller states, you have another big state across the river, which is Finland, right? Russia on the far end. Then you've got Poland,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Then you have Denmark and so on. And this in the European system, let's say we talk about the as Europe as a system, right?
Yes.
This is always a zone of incredible anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for the Russians, there's an axis which stretches from the northern frozen northern places
Mm-hmm.
all the way down to the Black Sea, because this is an existential border. So Finland is on that. Then you have the smaller states, right? And then you come down to Ukraine. And but why? What's the problem? The problem is that there are no geographic formations, etc., that can provide any defense. So once you
Mm-hmm.
land the land army, right, it's straight rolling to to Moscow, right?
You see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Germany
Mm-hmm.
has the same fear. Okay.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm not too. I don't
Well,
have.
why do the why? Okay, so there's the Baltic Sea. So once you land an army on the other side of the Baltic Sea,
Mm-hmm.
right, then it's just plains, and they're firm enough for you to. But they were firm enough for a cavalry, and they're firm enough for mechanized infantry. Or yeah, mechanized infantry. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's your problem, and you don't solve this problem with ideology. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
problem is not solved ideologically. These are real. Um, these are real existing anxieties that cannot be resolved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you pull the map just a bit to maybe your left, right, good. So you see, there's Poland, right? There's Sweden, there's Denmark on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Up above Estonia is Finland,
Yes.
yeah, which we can't see.
Mm-mm. It's not in the map.
Okay, so these all of these parts here, and then there's Kaliningrad. Just to show them Kaliningrad.
Hold on. That little
Yeah,
beauty there.
that little there. Yeah. So that's where the Teutonic Knights had ridden forth to assault to try and invade Russia, right? there's a very good movie which is called Alexander Nevsky, which is by Sergei Eisenstein and Sergei Prokofiev. Okay, the composer. Eisenstein is brilliant. It
Mm.
This was the film that inspired the Russians to resist in Stalingrad. They played in the cinemas every day, right? At for Stalingrad.
Mm.
And when they would the Kursk offensive and so on, and what was, I can't remember the names of those three Russian generals who I mean, they literally performed magic in the speed with which they cut through the German army and ended up in East Berlin,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
into what would become East Berlin.
Yes.
Right? Um, but then the point here is that these for Russian security,
Mm-hmm.
these are borderlands, and they must be a buffer,
The
right?
buffer. Mm-hmm.
So the moment you step in there, they start to bristle. They start to build up, right? Your defense is read as offense,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And this is so important. It's historically important. And you can't tell me, especially today, after listening to Carney talk,
Hmm.
and those familiar with our conversations will know that I keep coming back to this point about myself.
Hmm.
One reason why the implosion of the world that worked
Hmm.
has been such a difficult thing for me to digest and feel comfortable with in my skin is because of how wedded I was for a good 15 years because of my professional engagements to the rules based world order, blah, blah. And so the implosion, but then in terms of my analytical vantage point, not the least because of my global South origins,
Hmm.
singing the song of the global North has limitations in there. You can't sing that song when your origins are from the people that were colonized, brutalized, exploited, broken, etc. But you sing the song of the global rules based order, you have to find a way to accommodate it. And I did that.
Yeah, but you're singing the rules based order, but you can't sing it for Palestine.
You can't sing it for Palestine. You can't sing it for
Sing it for
Sudan. You
Sudan.
can't
Yeah.
sing it when the West starts panicking, when China starts investing within 2 years what you haven't invested in 20 years onto into the African continent. In
Sorry,
2008,
no, not in 20 years, longer than that, sir.
along
Right.
right?
1950s,
Yes.
1950s to the end of the century is 50. Then add 25, that's 75 years.
And I remember when Angela Merkel said, "Oh, but we cannot allow this to. It's already happened. You're too late." You pledged in the 1970s, all of you European states, we're going to give up to 2% of our GDP for development aid. Never happened except in some Benelux states,
Well,
in
well,
some Nordic
but I
states.
mean, they it is the structure of the problem is that the structure of the investment never really changed, right? Because it had to maintain a system. And so the system imposed its logic, and that's the periphery, and the
And the
periphery
center.
is disciplined by the center, right?
And this is where Carney
Yeah.
comes in as a, what do you call the kind of witness that needs a witness protection program afterwards. That's what Carney just did.
Um,
And
okay, so I'm not. Please don't not be moral about this.
hmm,
Yeah, we must read power, and what power is saying is that what you call the rules based order, is no longer working for us
mm-hmm,
in the way that it is, and so and since we want to revive it, so we're going to revive it amongst ourselves,
yeah.
right? Palestine, well, tough luck, right? You're not the kind of people that get that, right? So so basically, you're seeing that um, until I see performances that perform any change, and because they are terrified of China
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that Chinese investment actually de- brings infrastructure. Why? Because the Chinese recognize that they also need markets for their goods, right?
Yeah.
If they
Mm-hmm.
can increase the if they can increase the earning power of people in that place, then they buy more Chinese goods,
Oh, and I've
right?
seen the warehouses. I've seen the warehouses along the highways in sub-Saharan Africa. I've seen them. I have never seen anything comparable, tactically placed, strategically placed. And you enter the warehouse, it is a giant complex. It's
And
minimalistic,
that
rustical,
same in Latin America, right? Sorry.
and they have everything. They have everything that the locals desire. It's plastic and it's cheap, but it's
But
there.
it's there. And if you can't get it, then yeah. So that's my point. My point is that the Chinese are not making ideological prescriptions. I don't come and tell you that you have to do this and you have to do this with your econ. They come and they go, okay, here's the contract. This is what we need.
Hmm.
This is what we need. If you can't do that, then we can't do business with you, right?
So,
So
oh,
so that so because the thing about it is that they don't reward changes of government. So here's what happens: the government change and so on, and they if they want to renegotiate, the
hmm.
Chinese present them with the contract. So this is what you agreed, right? If you want this, then if you want to continue, then here's the contract, right? Now that that simple calculus,
Hmm.
where the Americans ran into the corner and peed themselves, the Europeans ran into the bushes and shit themselves, right? Both the Europeans and the Americans, because they require that it is now challenging the extractive basis on which they were able to enjoy the level of wealth that they
Hmm.
have,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the Chinese are just they're cutting that out on their feet, and so they don't like it. So hold on. So what
Hmm.
I'm saying is that what the question is whether Europe is going to read the board and change its strategy. That's an option that they have. So let's see what happens.
Hmm. You see, this goes back to my question that we've spent quite a lot of time on, and that is what this is not crystal ball reading I'm asking about, but in terms of tactical, strategic options, what
Mhm.
can be done when you have US bases around and inside of you, you've bought their equipment, and you now realize that the discourse that you had espoused and enforced and
Yeah.
indoctrinated, you expelled people with tenure for daring to address this, now has become vacuous. Namely, we will attack you and we will diminish you if you're an autocracy, not a democracy. NATO is an alliance of democracies for the protection of democracy. I can't tell you the number of debates I've had in my life with experts who stood on that point to build their entire argument.
Well,
From
well,
uh,
I used to just yawn.
well, but because at the end of that debate, the outcome was humiliation for thee who did not theologically bow down to this
But
doctrine.
that's why I yawned. I just said, look, what you're telling me here is theological. Well, I don't you stand for freedom? I said, no, hold on. You know where I come from.
Exactly.
I have to hold
Exactly.
on. You know where I come from. This is where I come from. Okay.
Hmm.
But when you want to talk about your freedoms, etc., right, you start addressing that first, right? And before you come to me with that, right? So I don't. I mean, I don't encourage it.
But in light
Okay.
of this contradiction, in light, basically, when I hear von der Leyen and when I hear Carney, I see them for an image. I see them standing on the yin yang symbol, not on one side or the other, but with their feet spread, one foot in the yin and one foot in the yang, and now having to compute this simultaneity of nonsense that they've harbored for such a long time.
But I don't. I don't. I think. I think. I think you're still reading the geopolitical morally.
Is that a moral reading? Because
Yes, it
I'm
is.
really trying.
It
Let
is.
me
It is.
let me try in a sentence, and if it's still moral, I'd like to be exposed for that. Because what I'm trying to figure out is, you say that I cannot cooperate with actor X for reasons that are normative, but we all know that there are some economic reasons there too. Then you say that in so doing, you know that you've increased your standing as a vassal with actor US. Okay. Now that US behaves in normatively the same reprehensible ways that you declared as characteristics of enmity, you are in a position where you have enmity on your former ally side and enmity by principle, that is, on the other side. What options do you have in acting? And what options are you leaving the Russians? And what options are you leaving the US? I like to say, until yesterday, I said I feel that we are in the midst of a conflict among the Europeans. If we lump U.S., New Zealand, Australia, Canada into the same pot of Europeans, the Europeans are at war with each other, and there are four parties: U.S. with its allies in Eastern Europe, Poland, and all the other former Soviet satellites who can't help but have knee-jerk anti-Russian Russophobia in their
But,
entire
but
foreign
the Eastern
front.
Europeans, the Americans are the bulwark against their fear of Rana, or not but Russian economic and political annexation, right? Not because the
Right.
Russians,
So,
the Russians have a long military history and know that extension over that into the Eastern European lands
mhm,
has never gone well. It's always overextended armies, right?
overextended armies. But there are four fronts. No, I don't want know if I should say front, but there are four
So that was Eastern Europe, yeah. Next
Eastern
one.
Europe. Then there's the what at some point was called Old Europe by Rumsfeld, when Rumsfeld said it was Old
Hmm.
Europe,
Old Europe, yeah.
referring to, pardon me,
Yeah, old Europe, yeah.
Old Europe. Then there's Russia.
Hmm.
Then there is the US.
Yeah, okay. Okay. What about Australia and New
Well,
Zealand?
those are the Five Eyes. I lump them in with the US. And I mean by that, uh, and even so, it doesn't work anymore because Canada was supposed to be Five Eyes.
Well, but you're saying that, okay. So I mean, here's what I would say: is that what you're looking at is a realignment of European power in
Mm-hmm.
order to preserve their position as European powers,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Danish were referring to themselves to the Europe as the place of great powers, and when they were talking about Greenland, I think that slipped out because if you assess Europe, there are no great powers left. That's done, right? So
Nostalgia.
Carney's statement showed that there is no great power left. The point is that people will change they will change their positions like as easily as people change shoes when the pressure comes.
When the
So
pressure comes, yes.
so what you're seeing is a response to pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and when that happens, if you see an actor that can maintain um, a moral coherence across that with strategic depth, then you're looking at mastery. That probably will never last more than a generation because that usually indicates a very unique person or two in the center. Okay, so so you can't, you have to read, as I always say to you, that Europe is resource poor
Mm-hmm.
and and needs to dominate places that are resource rich in order that it can, because Europe is a market center.
Bad
It's a,
news
it's
for
a,
Ukraine.
it's a market and historically a market and an industrial center, right?
Again,
So
bad news for Ukraine, huh?
yeah, so 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 the time now is that what you're going to be seeing are European European strategists now are now sitting down and looking at resources within Europe's borders or on its periphery and making calculations about how to develop that. Because one of the things that this highlights is that somehow they have to bring some kind of manufacturing back to Europe. The problem is that you cannot both be a financial center and and um, and and a manufacturing center, um, in the way that, oh, sorry, you cannot both be a financial center, a manufacturing center, and a reserve currency at the same time, except in the presence of war.
Oh, I can see that the comments have been coming in. I haven't paid attention at all. There's one that says, "Do you have thoughts on the board of peace?" That's back to the Middle East.
Um, what's that?
Oh, that's the only valid reaction to that. And it's Trump. It's Trump's newest brainchild.
No,
I
no,
don't know
no,
where it
no,
came from.
sorry, no, I'm sorry. That's a contradiction in terms. What's that?
Oh,
Look, I think that really, um,
I like
you,
that one.
I think that really we have to see that what we are looking at is naked power. Okay,
Yes.
that that what is now Israel and Palestine and stretching to the Suez is a strategic corridor.
Mm,
It's now also a resource corridor because the majority of the natural gas off the coast of both Israel and Palestine is on the Palestinian side.
yes.
So the Israelis have just seized that, and a week into the war, after they seized it, the Europe and the United States and other European governments or companies signed contracts to exploit that. Right. So
Um,
that was a week after October 7th. So by October by October 20th, it was all done. Okay.
yep.
And then what you've seen afterwards, because now the Israelis are already talking, they're already flagging up um, the Ben Gurion Canal, etc. That's what's got the Gulf Arabs there, because the Gulf Arabs are looking at the northern route, and Chinese are talking about the trains across Eurasia, and they're both shitting and peeing themselves, because then it means that that the transshipment routes, which they depend upon, and huge container and redistribution centers are,
Mm-hmm.
are now at risk. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so They need to open the capacity of the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. And if they have to sacrifice the Palestinians for that, they are willing. They've just proven that they are willing. All right. Both UAE or Qatar and they're willing. Okay.
Mhm.
So yeah, but sorry, but whimsical distraction. Eritrea and Somaliland are a problem for another project, not this one. Okay. The main
Um,
problem for this particular project are the Yemenis, and everybody has the Chinese, the Americans. Who else? Who got bases in Djibouti? I never remember.
it's China, it's France. I don't remember if US have a position in Djibouti, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
But
we
I know about the French one.
yeah, just
Uh,
check it for me. I never remember. Um,
Djibouti.
but yeah, so that's another project. I don't want to go there on what that project represents.
So
Okay,
what we have here
Eritrea
is
and Somalia.
US, Camp Lemonnier, China, France, Japan, and there is
Yeah,
some presence from Italy.
yeah, I
US,
thought
China,
Japan was
France,
there.
Japan, and
I
Italy.
I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. And then Turkey is looking at building another port somewhere there, but
Mm.
right. So um yeah, so
And
but
hold
but
on.
all of this infrastructure requires the Red Sea, right? So if they've already invested in that infrastructure in that military infrastructure for the protection of trade, then they're already invested in the
Mm-hmm.
expansion of Red Sea Mediterranean route. And there
Yes.
aren't many choices, right? You either expand the Suez. If you're going to expand the Suez, you have no resilience, right? So, so while the work is going on, then trade may back up. So it's got to work while it's. So if you're expanding the Suez, you have to be able to expand the Suez while it's still being used, right?
Yes.
The only other option is to have an alternative canal, which then allows you to expand the Suez.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yes.
understand that that's what Palestine represents, and they are depending upon the Israelis to hold the kind of stability for that. Um, if I think if that goes on for another year or two, then they're going to have to abandon that. But the calculation is not about the Palestinians.
Yes.
Okay. Um, so if you're talking about Trump's um,
Right.
conversation about the border peace, then I mean,
I have some notes. I can share some notes with some specificity. I
well,
wasn't even aware that it had gone on to 60 countries being invited to become members.
yeah, but it doesn't. It really does. Just. I mean, literally, I think you can ignore that,
Hold
right?
on. Hold on. His idea is to replace the United Nations. If that goes through, we have a
Yeah, but
60
the
billion
But the United Nations has been really replaced on this a long time ago,
with a void, with nothingness.
right? Because basically, no, this has been about American support for Israeli policy
Mm-hmm.
in the region.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different. All they're doing is trying to dress it up in some kind of legitimacy. So I'm not going to waste my mental cycles in analyzing that. What I will know is that it tells me the performance of it tells me about who about you know of where people are getting their soup. That's what the performance of it tells me. But the rest of it doesn't matter,
Well,
right? I
there's
mean,
one thing. Yeah.
there is no nation that has broken as many UN resolutions than Israel. Tops it, right? So it's not. So when they say, oh, it's replacing the UN, what all the UN the thing that the UN was doing effectively was being a safety valve for Palestinian um, um, violent um, repercussions because when the Palestinians lash back, then and that gets hot, which the Israelis actually sometimes want, then the UN will step in to do some negotiating, but
Hmm.
it doesn't achieve anything, right? The Israelis continue on, so the in that region, the UN is irrelevant except in in its in its capacity to provide aid, etc., for the Palestinians.
And
But the
here,
Israelis have severely curtailed that, right? Because they don't they don't. I mean, that's why so I'm saying that it tells you what the next thing is going to be.
it tells you what the next thing is going to be, and it also tells us something. I mean, you can imagine that in a in principle, I should be personally deeply concerned and somehow touched by the appropriation of the term peace by the US in its geopolitical power
but
projection. Pardon me?
no, but what's his name? Sorry, Roman writer Tacitus.
Yes.
Tacitus tells you, he says that they they what's it? He said they create a wasteland and name it peace. Yeah,
Let me see.
Tacitus and peace. Yeah, Tacitus and peace. I mean,
Hmm.
none of this is new.
I have something here. Let me see if I have a quote, an exact quote. I don't. I know the quote you're referring to, right? Yes, the wasteland that they call peace. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
Ubi solitudinem faciunt pacem
mm,
appellant.
yeah.
That's it.
There
That's
are
I
people
remember
on
that.
earth to covet wealth and poverty with equal craving. They plunder, they butcher, they ravish, and call it by the lying name of empire. They make a desert and call it peace.
That's it.
Right?
And I have so many notes, so many things I want to pick up, but this is one thing I'd like to throw in. When it comes to this board of peace, I'd like to just zoom in briefly on the word peace. I've noticed that during the genocide, um, there have been several efforts by
Mm-hmm.
movements that support the genocide to utilize the word peace and to rebrand peace, including through the peace through strength principle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically domination sold as peace.
Mm-hmm.
Dominance, domination, and power differentials sold as peace. You can say that's
But yeah, well, that's what Carney has been saying. That's what
right.
Carney's speech said.
And it's just sort of, I think it bears saying or reminding people that in 1957, the academic discipline of peace studies, as inspired from medical ethics, medical anthropology, and sociology, and yes, sociology was born in Oslo, Norway, as a field of study. And the findings after several decades, 60 years of research, are that in order to have sustainable patterns of interaction between actors with different levels of power resources, so actors with power differentials, for them to interact in such a way that domination um, does not create grievances, for it is through grievances that are created that conflicts are fueled. And the contrary of peace is not war, it is conflict. It's not, and the essence is unresolved conflict is the antithesis to peace. Is what 60 years of work in that domain will show you, that warfare is only a particular expression of violence, and violence is the metastasized state of an unresolved conflict that then becomes kinetic
Okay.
when it's primitive, but
All
when it's
right. So
sophisticated, it's structural.
okay. So let me give you. Whilst I agree with that in most cases,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to go back to Ukraine.
Mm.
Okay, if the Russians amass troops on the Ukrainian border even before this,
Mm-hmm.
right, it is a zone of anxiety for both the Ukrainians and the Europeans, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
Europeans in the east of Europe,
Yes.
right? That's historically been true. When the Europeans build up, begin to harden that border in the name of their own security,
Mm-hmm.
it raises Russian anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some, and you will see the density, the historical density of warfare on that border is precisely for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so what you realize is that yes, there are those conflicts which arise, which then eventually spill over to war, but there are some types of warfare which are conflicts which are just based upon irreconcilable anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
They're not reconcilable, right? The interest of one is against the interest of the other. That is the basic problem of Europe, right? Once Europe begins to arm itself, okay, with trying to keep its nations federal, the natural anxieties of the Europeans with their history begins to raise its head,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And so the question that so that when you're talking about Europe and you want it to be, which is the part of the world that there is no other part of the world that has had as many wars over
Mm-hmm.
its history as Europe. None, right? Um,
How dare we remind our audience of that?
right.
It is the beacon of
It's historic.
civilization.
It's historical. That's it. And I'm not making it morally. I'm just saying that that's the reality of. I'm not going okay because they're bad. I'm not saying that that's the reality of Europe,
But
right?
everybody knows that war is the father of inventiveness.
That one, and that takes us back to my article, okay? Because of of when um when in the First World War the United States not only became the financier of the Allies
Mm-hmm.
but the supplier of weapons. That was the birth of the American armaments industry.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Listen, it's we're now at 11:37. I get guys. I noticed that you'll see that our last video was not shared. That is because Substack has lost it, and I don't know if it's because I
This is.
indicated what American strategy must be in West Africa
Mm-hmm.
and um what the bombing of Sokoto indicates.
Mm-hmm.
Because I took you on the map and I showed you where Sokoto is, right? And how close it is to the city of Niamey.
Mm-hmm.
And from Niamey you're then able to cross into both Mali and Burkina Faso, right?
Yes.
So I showed you that. So I don't know. So
You showed us
this,
what is to come.
yeah.
Perhaps we're not supposed to be discussing things ahead.
So I've put this at the end as a test to see if the same thing happens. Um,
Oh. Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah. So that's that. So this is where we are. The don't be fooled by Carney's rhetoric,
Mm.
right? There is the level of integration on economy, finance, military, and and legal
Mm.
and and intelligence of those states is like it, part pulling them apart without without war or something as rupture is nigh impossible, and they know that. Okay, um, if they did so, they would create. They would create if they just withdrew completely. They would create uh, s- an asymmetry because the Russians are armed. Their military industrial complex is working,
Mm-hmm.
and they have numbers, and they have weight, and they have experience on the battlefield. Okay, so that these are not the kinds of wars which have occurred in places like Afghanistan, Iraq. So this is a very different kind of war. This is a war of territory. Those
Mm-hmm.
were not really wars of of, of territory,
Mm-hmm.
right? Iraq. Sorry, not Iraq. Iraq was part of that, but then you're coming, you're withdrawing, and the Americans could not win the territory. They basically um, funded um, the effective mercenary conquest of parts of Syria and and Iraq, and that created the unintended consequences of the rise of ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, and they would never talk about it like that. So when you see, yeah, but this is historical record about how the Americans basically um, provided the money to ex-Baathists, etc., to with their own militias and etc. To fight that war that they could not
Mm-hmm.
win. Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. Yusuf is making a suggestion that I should perhaps use a microphone, an extra microphone, and record it. Okay, I'll look at that. I'll have that in place by next week.
Oh
But
yes, 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 Yusuf. Very deep
thank you.
experience speaking there.
Yeah.
Indeed. This is you know, oh, my internet connection is perfect, but it says so just to confirm, Yusuf, yes. Um Towards the end of my service in academia, there was some controversy about the subject matters that we were discussing. And after two publications went ahead and distorted entirely what was actually said, completely distorted it. We started giving interviews only with recording devices that we would put on the table to record our own archival material of the conversation, just so that we could use it, utilize it, produce it, and present it as is,
Mhm.
rather than after the editing of
Yeah.
partial and not always benevolent journalists. So, yes, I remember that this is how to actually live in the world in which we are today. You have to, that's autonomy. So that I
Yep.
appreciate that advice very much, and I think I'll start doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. I mean, always a pleasure to hold these conversations with you. I people who know I've been reading the comments and actually responding.
Mm.
Yeah. But sometimes I haven't been mentioning you. I think whimsical distraction. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you, Yusuf, also. And Hafsa, Salim, Billy Bumbo, um,
If
Robert
I had
Oman.
anything to throw in to the end, is peace is about de-domination and solving anxieties through preventing unsolved anxieties. And when an actor behaves in such a way as to increase anxieties all around them, because for some reason that's the only way they feel normal, the only way they feel centered is by,
You're psychologizing the United States.
well,
I think for me, the reaction of the United States is very rational. From
It
from the
is.
perspective of the United, of
It
how the
is.
United States works and its internal facilities, the problem is that if you're not party to their internal dynamics, and you don't consider that in their geostrategic, that the performance that they're making is not for you, it's for them, right? At a time of great internal U.S. anxiety, right? So,
The
so
reason why peace
Mhm.
is impossible is because peace is logical and not rational.
um, then if it's logical and not rational, then you are just admitting that um, it's an impossible personal permanent project.
It's a
It,
process. It's a
I'm
process,
saying
not
it's
a
an impossible permanent project. You cannot have permanent peace. So
yeah.
we are entering a time of we have entered a time in of power realignment, and power realignment really ever happens. It's almost impossible to happen without war. Yeah.
Here
When
we are.
when when Catherine the Great um when Catherine the Great invaded the largest polity in Europe, which was Poland,
Hmm.
okay, um when she was finished and she got it, that's why she split it between the Austro-Hungarian Empire herself and the Prussians, because she knew, right? Because remember, Catherine the Great herself was German.
Mm. Oh, is that? I wasn't. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, Catherine the Great was German. She was a German
Oh.
princess, she was a German princess who married the Russian Tsar and
Hmm.
then ruled Russia. And when and the Germans thought that they were installing this woman who would be pliant to German interests.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
and
I
then
thought she was Austrian. Totally off.
Germany didn't exist then. So Austria and okay, so so my position is that after Otto von Bismarck,
Hmm.
right? What is
Hmm.
now Austria and what was Prussia is now Germany. The Austrians hold themselves separate, but right, but in terms of functional, right, they don't have an army of their own,
Hmm.
right, etc. You understand? So I hold them as being German.
Hmm.
Okay. Um. So yes, but so I'm saying that she came from, and so that's what she did. After once they conquered it, they pursued a a, a treaty in which they split the land.
Well,
Okay.
that was diplomacy, the peak of diplomacy back in the day.
Yes, that was so. So my point here is, yeah, really okay. So guys, remember that to do this, please subscribe and please subscribe, and I hope that
It's free. It's
and
free.
please, any kind of, it's, yeah, it's free, but also to keep doing this, I need support. So if you can become a paid subscriber, please do. And lots of love. See you next Wednesday, and thank you for hanging around for this conversation.
I could go on for 2 more hours, Alex, if life wasn't lifing out there.
Yeah, and we've had a number of new people, and I sorry if I haven't mentioned your names, please forgive me. Yeah, but thank you for coming, and please come again. Liberate Humanity is another one I've seen. Parson. Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, we gotta go. It's now it's nearly 12.
See you
Okay.
in 7 days,
I look forward to it.
if the world is still there. Inshallah.
Let's see if they save the life.
Thank you.
All right.